look at antiquity at both ends of the Eurasian landmass 2,000 years ago, or 2,500 years ago, there are forms of capitalism there. And some people will go even further and say that capitalism can even exist in animal societies. So, what is capitalism? That's the good question that you ask. Capitalism is basically storing up assets that you can exchange in the future for something that you may not want at the moment, but that you may not even know that you want in the future.
Capitalism implies a belief that everyone in society can be made better off if individuals are encouraged and allowed to make money. The state intervenes to make sure that this process of individuals making profits doesn't harm other people. One thing we learned in the 20th century, and we learned it the hard way, in both the extremely capitalistic societies and the extremely socialist societies, is that the extreme forms of economies and government just don't work.
The term capitalism is immediately connected to exploitation of workers, greedy owners of capital, violating laws, influencing lawmakers to follow their interests. All that has happened, and it's true. However, capitalism, even in this rude form, has provided substantial economic progress.
Private property, in fact, is the basis of self-expression and the basis of freedom. And it's very important to have a self-respect and to have a life without fear. I was born in a society where there was no private property at all, zero. And I understand how the people feel themselves and how many people, even with the danger to be in prison for 25 years or even to be killed, were trying to make their own business underground, because that is the part of the human being. This is like art, like music, like poetry.
It is a definition that Marx used, and actually Max Weber used it afterwards. It has three parts. The first part is that the most of production is done on privately owned means of production. The second part of the definition is that labor is hard. It simply means that labor does not play the entrepreneurial functions. And the third part of the definition is that the coordination is decentralized.
Capitalism is about the accumulation, distribution, allocation of wealth over time within a power structure. So capitalism has different strands. It goes in different ways. There are capitalists in China. China doesn't have democracy. China has a very authoritarian version of capitalism with central planning, state-guided, state-directed economic development. And I would say that even the United States, known as a capitalist bastion, also has a pretty heavy regulation in some ways.
How would we define capitalism? It's the economic system fundamentally actually based on extraction of finite primary resources. It is facilitated by a money printing privilege of the financial institutions. It is also looking for, it's focused on this optimal allocation between private capital and hired labor, with a view to maximize goods and services and also maximize the returns to shareholders. In this overall process, it's actually paying scant regard to the outcomes to alike, I would say, the employees, the communities and the environment.
The problem is not so much capitalism, but the fact that capitalism has not become capital in the interest of capitalists as opposed to capital in the interest of the real economy. It's now a question of the owners of capital putting capital to work, but taking as much of the returns of capital as possible to themselves and denying the rest of the economy, basically undervaluing labor and undervaluing the wider society. The levels of inequality are totally not explainable by any kind of merit, any kind of intelligence, any kind of quality, other than the fact that some people had the privilege of being owners of capital at the beginning.
I don't think that economics alone explains capitalism. Politics plays a big part of it too. And actually, a historical perspective is also necessary to understand how a capitalist system came to dominate globally. There's how we actually experience and live in a capitalist system, a system that treats humans as resources, that commodifies work, that has concentrated power in the hands of a few.
I don't really believe in isms, sort of once you start talking about an ism, you're often, you've kind of started down the slippery slope towards metaphysics. And, I think that one of the, things that we see, when people use the word capitalism is, we enter this, we enter a realm in which there's like 10 or 12 or different definitions of this, all of which sort of are kind of imagining a particular metaphysical directionality to life, to how people operate in the economy. There's nothing inherent in a society that has that concentrates capital to achieve certain political and economic ends that would lead to the kind of destruction that we see today throughout our society.
Economics succeeds only by not explaining capitalism. The radical point that I'm making is that it is one thing to fail, it's quite another to succeed in your own discipline by ensuring that your own discipline is irrelevant vis-a-vis its subject matter, which is capitalism. As long as economics or economists are in the business of creating quantitative models, which are meant as abstractions of capitalism, such that once you have them, you convince yourself that you've understood the architecture of capitalism. As long as that's what economics do, economics would only succeed in building these models if these models are dangerously irrelevant to capitalism.